Right, that's 11:01 as far as I can see on my watch. So thank you everyone for attending. Just to let you know, this meeting is being recorded. So you can pass it through your organization, look at it afterwards, and it will also be on our website here at Cadac. So I'm sure good few of you are aware of Cadac, but if not, we are a digitalization company specializing in the Autodesk sector. So anything that you have to do with Autodesk, expanding your digital horizon and how you want to do that, then please get in touch with myself here in the UK, and we'll be able to help you going forward. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Jonathan, who will be our technical help for the day. Jonathan, if you want to take the lead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Johnny. So I'll go through a bit of an introduction about myself when we actually go through into the presentation. So hello and welcome to this webinar on an introduction to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. We're going to be looking specifically at Autodesk Docs. So we've got Johnny Clay, who's the account manager for Cadac, and as you can see, his email address is shown there. So my name is Jonathan Brookfield, and I'm a technical consultant based in the UK, working for an Autodesk value-added distributor. You can connect with me on LinkedIn using the URL shown. So before we begin, please note the workflow shown in this webinar presents the best practice we could establish at that moment in time. For software developments and updates, or should you wish to implement these workflows on a real-world project, it is advised that you consult with a technical team or relevant Cadac expert in relation to applying the presented workflows to a specific project. So this webinar is aimed at looking at those looking to adopt an Autodesk Cloud solution and individuals keen on finding out more information about Autodesk Docs. With this in mind, the following subjects are to be covered. I'm going to kick off by giving you a brief overview about my experience and how this relates to Autodesk Docs. We're then going to run through an introduction about general industry trends, comparing life before the common data environment and what benefits the Autodesk Construction Cloud brings to AEC projects and beyond. We'll also take a look at a high-level overview of the Autodesk Construction Cloud offerings and how Autodesk Docs fits into that suite. The bulk of this presentation will evolve around the features included inside of Autodesk Docs, and I should provide you with the details on their operation and purpose. Depending on time, and hopefully we should have enough to actually go through some live demonstrations of what we've learned within the theory presentation part. So we're essentially putting the features theory into further context. And finally, we shall end today on thoughts and a summary relating to Autodesk Docs and allow some time for question and answer session. If you do have any questions, please add them into the chat box and we shall address them at the end of this webinar. Okay, so just a little bit of information about myself. I had 13 years experience in the AEC industry, predominantly working for design consultancies, with some contractor experience having worked in a joint venture. I left the AEC industry in February 2020 to join the Autodesk Partner Channel. So I left industry fairly recently, just before the pandemic really hit Europe. So I mainly have experience in civil engineering, although having worked in both the maritime and water sectors, I have a lot of exposure to other disciplines such as geotechnical, mechanical and electrical, drainage, environmental and structural engineering. I was fortunate enough to have been able to work internationally, and my project portfolio spans over South America, Africa, the Middle East and Europe. My qualifications include those in civil engineering, building information modelling, and virtual design and construction. My industry roles include being a BIM manager, where I implemented industry standards such as BS 1192 and ISO 19650 at organisational, project and client levels. I also have project management and technician experience, which is where I gained the majority of my CAD knowledge from. My core CAD software skills include AutoCAD, Civil 3D, InfraWorks, Revit, BIM 360, and the Autodesk Construction Cloud, which is what we're going to be focused on today. So, before we delve into the Autodesk Docs features, we're going to begin by touching on a few relatable aspects as to why individuals and organisations should consider adopting a cloud common data environment, in particular, of course, Autodesk Docs. So, traditional approaches before cloud common data environments could encounter a range of pain points, including lack of consistency and standardization, stakeholders internal and external, including designers, contractors and clients, and planning authorities, all doing their own thing. Lack of visibility into document activities, in other words, siloed information. Stakeholders unaware of other teams' project progress and no real grasp on deliverables being created. Dispersed lines of communication across project teams. Key stakeholders left in the dark due to sporadic information flows. Leveraging multiple technology solutions. Not only do organisations invest in a cloud system, to get the full extent of functionality they require, they need to invest in third-party software and applications. Inconsistent and disconnected processes and technologies. A theme we saw with some of the other points, stakeholders using variants of software solutions, including servers and cloud systems that don't translate with one another. Manual processes to check documentation and for approval workflows. Hard copy check prints for reviewers and approvers to add comments. Mistakes made when trying to decipher other penmanship and handwriting. That seems like a funny one, but it happens so often. And finally, beyond this, to have a digital version of a check print, which is required to scan that hard copy back into a system. Finally, can't find what I need when I need it. This could be due to inconsistent archiving, storage, and/or accessibility issues. The scenarios could cause one or more of the following negative consequences, including rework, misinformation circulated and again siloed inaccessible information, a reduced project win rate due to clients requiring newer forms of data management, a larger outlay on technology due to having multiple solutions. This could also be for bespoke IT configuration of trying to get cloud systems to perform how projects and clients want them to. It could also lead to abortive and rework on IT systems as vendors update their systems and applications. More variance in technological solutions requires broader training requirements due to individuals having to learn and adopt multiple solutions. Prone to human error, time spent on manual checking. There is no doubt that the more you can automate in regards to verification, the less human error impacts on project delivery. Always worried about whether I had the right information. This could again stem from inaccessibility of information and lack of comprehensive verification and validation workflows. And finally, lack of employee morale. It seems over the top to mention this, but I have experienced this aspect on a frequent basis. Designers, including engineers and technicians, don't want to be hemorrhaging valuable project time on document management or quality management systems. Labour-intensive and cumbersome manual checking and approval workflows can cause disgruntlement inside of design teams. So we've looked at some of the scenarios encountered when a project is running without Autodesk Docs, but what are these scenarios post-ACC or Autodesk Construction Cloud implementation? So, access to document metadata. Project personnel can clearly see data such as whether they are using the correct version of a file. Consistency and standardization of process, not only just a single task team or organization, but across entire project teams. I've always been a firm believer in consistency and standardization, leading to familiarity, which subsequently helps drive efficiency. Accurate document status information and a single source of the truth. Do more with fewer tools and resources. No need for various cloud systems and third-party add-ins for file hosting and workflows. This is a one-stop shop for a lot of your project data management requirements. Alignment and transparency of project documents between all key stakeholders. More seamless design integrations, with Autodesk Docs being able to host lots of file formats, not just CAD-orientated applications, but MS Office applications and beyond. Design interoperable workflows have never been easier. Everyone has access to the right project information at the right time. With a centralized data host including robust permissions, project users have the ability to access files anytime, anywhere. And finally, flexible and configurable workflows to help suit the needs and requirements of clients and organizations. Looking at the positive business outcomes of adopting and implementing Autodesk Docs are as follows. Up-to-date project information. Everyone is working from the same data taken from a centralized source. Win more. Working efficiently in advanced, smarter data management is what clients and customers are requesting more frequently than ever before. With this data accessibility and using the correct information comes a reduction in project rework. Single technology investment, a single platform that can fulfill all project data management needs. More control over the process. With the features included inside of Autodesk Docs, document control personnel have better automated tools when controlling review and approval processes, file naming, and more. Increased job satisfaction. Project personnel can concentrate on their job role and spend less time worrying about document control and quality management systems. This also includes more time spent on value-adding activities. This could be seen as removing the mundane. And finally, data seamlessly passes from design to construction with a reduction in information loss that was seen in more traditional approaches. Something that isn't frequently mentioned in regards to benefits of Autodesk Docs is the opportunity organizations and individuals have to help create a positive impact on the environment. I won't call these buzzwords, as I feel it will trivialize a very real subject, but we see these words and phrases talked about often, particularly in the AEC industry. By moving to Autodesk Docs, you can mitigate against and eliminate the use of paper, ink, and printers, with the subsequent transport, storage, and energy usage no longer being required. The financial benefits are obvious too, with less material and office space usage. Not only this, but with the added ability to enhance online collaboration and remote working, face-to-face meetings become less frequent, also having a positive economic and environmental outcomes due to a large reduction in travel. Before we delve into the Autodesk features, I'd like to cover a high-level overview of the core unified product subscriptions available. Autodesk BIM Collaborate, for design collaboration and model coordination software for design and virtual design and construction teams. The subscription includes design collaboration and model coordination. Further to this, we have Autodesk BIM Collaborate Pro. This includes all the Autodesk BIM Collaborate has to offer, but includes further model coordination capabilities including Revit Cloud work sharing, collaboration for Civil 3D, and collaboration for Plant 3D. We then have Autodesk Takeoff, which involves both two-dimensional and three-dimensional quantity takeoff software, specifically aimed at estimators and quantity surveyors, but useful for the entirety of the project teams when calculating costings. The subscription simply includes the Takeoff module. Moving on, we come to Autodesk Build, which provides tools for project management and contractor site teams. This includes the build and cost modules in the subscription. Furthermore, it will also include the PlanGrid Build mobile app used for budget control and change order management. Finally, we come to Autodesk Docs, which is the product we're specifically looking at in this webinar, and is a centralized common data environment for hosting files and information throughout a project's lifecycle. It includes features such as document control and versioning, no matter the file formats, CAD software publishing, in particular for AutoCAD and Revit, 2D and 3D viewing and comparison, approval workflows, issues and markups, and reporting analytics. Autodesk Docs is now available as a standalone product for those not requiring the benefits of the other modules, and comes free with all the other subscriptions. Included in all the subscriptions, we have centralized administration capabilities, dashboards, reporting, and Construction IQ. We're now going to take a look at the key features Autodesk Docs brings when supporting your project data management and information workflows. Autodesk Docs allows the project administrator or administrators to apply robust permissions to folders throughout the common data environment. They could be applied so, for example, a civil engineer can see their products in a work in progress area, but can't access the mechanical engineer's work in progress files. It could also be relating to data sensitivity, such as important contractual or financial data that only the project managers and other senior project officials can access. There could be a level of security on the data being accessed, for example, information relating to a high-pressure gas main that is considered serious infrastructure for a particular country or region. A lot of the time, it's about ensuring the right people have the right access to only the up-to-date information that they need. There are 6 levels of permissions inside of Autodesk Docs, 2 types of view, one with the ability to download, 2 versions of Create, one with the ability to upload files, Edit, and Manager, which allows full control for an individual inside a specific folder. Project stakeholders can be added in 4 ways by the project administrators, either by name, email address, or project role or company. Autodesk Docs allows for users to subscribe to a particular folder or location. This ensures they receive emails when any activity occurs to the selected folder. It is a feature that is most useful for document controllers and information managers who will be notified if, for example, a file is added to a folder ready for them to submit to a client or external stakeholder. When using Autodesk Docs, users have the ability to filter information. This tool is important as it is one of the key purposes for having a field-based file naming convention and file attributes. It also reduces the need for having a complex folder structure, as users can search and filter data as opposed to navigate through tiers of folders. Users have the ability to filter files by the software application in which it was created, the current file version, when the file was last updated using a range between a start and an end date, and by any further attributes assigned to the project, including metadata such as status, revision, or classification. Inside of Autodesk Docs, we have attributes. I wouldn't say this is simply file metadata, as that terminology may conflict with that used in standards such as ISO 19650. Attributes are a combination of both naming fields and metadata. They are how project teams and organizations define what data is assigned to files inside of a common data environment. They're a valuable asset for when creating structured data, a term we hear frequently in the worlds of building information modelling and virtual design and construction. As we touched on the previous slide, attributes are an important function when enabling data to be filterable. The naming standard is a fairly new addition to Autodesk Docs, and I have to say, from a data management perspective, it's a very powerful tool. It is user-defined and allows project teams to create a file naming convention based on a series of attributes that we looked at previously. The default out-of-the-box naming standard that Autodesk provides is following ISO 19650. However, this is fully customizable and can be amended to suit any organization or client requirements. It breaks attributes down into two main categories: document attributes, which act as the file naming convention fields, such as a project reference, originator, and number. We then have related attributes that act as the file metadata, which is information that can change dependent on the progress of a file, such as the status and revision fields. We're going to look into a bit more detail about how this works when we look at the live demonstration. So further down, we then have the folder enforcement menu. This is a list of all the folders inside of the project and allows the administrator to select which areas the naming convention is to be applied to. In certain circumstances, users won't want the naming convention to be enforced. These are generally in locations where software applications create their own files which won't follow the naming convention, such as the location for a Civil 3D data shortcuts folder, recap point cloud projects, and GIS applications automatically creating a series of external data such as shapefiles. Finally, we then have the holding area, which can be turned on or off depending on project requirements. The holding area is a segregated location for files uploaded, not conforming to the naming standard. It allows document controllers to upload files to the project, for example, those delivered from an external third party or subcontractor, for the acceptance that these files then be assigned a document reference conforming to the mandated convention assigned to the project. Diverting slightly away from Autodesk Docs for a moment, I feel it is important to understand why we have a naming standard adopted in a codification format. Standardization. Every stakeholder on a project or for the same client is using the same file naming format. With ISO 19650, this goes beyond simply trying to standardize a naming convention at organizational level and looks at standardization at a client's full portfolio, industry sector, or even countrywide. Familiarity. As previously mentioned in this webinar, familiarity helps drive efficiency as project teams and individuals become acclimatized to using the same codification lists across an organization's project portfolio. Conformance. We are now seeing many clients insisting projects are delivered following a data standard, such as ISO 19650. In some cases, particularly here in the UK, the government has mandated all public sector projects follow these standards. Information exchange. When delivering or handing data over, information to a client or end user, this information needs to be inputted into an asset management or facility management system. By using a codification standard, artificial intelligence or AI can be adopted in automatically deciphering how and where this information is to be stored, limiting the requirement for human interaction. Filtering and sorting. Like we touched on before with the Autodesk Docs filter function, it allows masses of data to be sorted using only a few clicks. Flat folder hierarchy. Finally, as we touched on before, it mitigates the need for having complex mazes of folders inside a project's common data environment. We then come on to the file's advanced settings. This simply has two options. One, it allows project teams to include an expiration duration for file links. This can be between 30 and 365 days, depending on the project requirements. Two, it allows the project teams to decide whether users or link recipients can see the full folder path when opening a folder inside a web browser. This is particularly helpful when there are more sensitive data areas within a project's common data environment, such as financial or contractual information. Before reviews can take place on a project, the project administrator must configure the various approval workflows required. There are a fair few variables to consider here, as number of tasks or discipline teams, number of gateways, involved stakeholders, the file or file's journey looking at its movement from a work in progress area to its final destination, and so on. We can see it begins with general information, including a suitable workflow name and description. As an example, we may need workflows per each project task team, such as a design lead responsible for a particular package of works, including a team beneath them, with engineers and technicians. So we might need a workflow for a civil engineering team, a mechanical team, an environmental team, and so on. The steps can vary depending on the workflow requirements. It might involve up to 6 dependencies or gateways, depending on the needs for the approval workflow. For each review step can be more than an individual and can involve a team of reviewers. The identified steps are fully customizable and can be assigned a suitable name for clear identification purposes. The project administrator can also identify who is to perform the checks, be it a name, email address, or project role. Autodesk Docs has helpfully included a time allowance parameter to ensure project timescales aren't held up by individuals not performing their reviews in a timely fashion. As we continue to look down the approval workflows configuration, we can see that we can customize a reviewer or approver's response. This includes what happens when a file is approved, rejected, or further customizable fields if needed. Specific clients or organizations might have a set of document control responses, particularly if they operate in the public sector frameworks. Therefore, the project administrator can also customize the review and status label. There are also 3 icons used to identify the outcome of the workflow, including a green tick, red cross, or a grey tick accompanied by a comment bubble. Autodesk Docs has also included a copy functionality for duplicating the file to a particular location. This is particularly beneficial when working with ISO 19650 workflows, ensuring a file is copied to either a shared or a published folder, dependent on the approval workflow purpose. Finally, we have a customized note or disclaimer, which helps the review stakeholders or initiators in understanding the workflow purpose or further action required. This supplements the description given at the beginning of the configuration. So moving on to transmittals. Transmittals allows project teams to deliver and download packages of files to external stakeholders and systems. In reality, not everyone on the project will be working with the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Therefore, transmittals are an ideal tool for delivering design packages at particular project milestones. Document controllers can create various delivery packages depending on the recipient type or requirements. The transmittal can be downloaded as a zip file for ease of delivery and can also be downloaded as an Excel spreadsheet report as a log of the transmittal taking place. We also, inside of Autodesk Docs, have the issues functionality. So issues can be recorded inside of Autodesk Docs and is a great tool to mitigate against having to create further documentation or forms. Issues can be identified with a name or title, given a status, whether this is an ongoing issue or whether the issue has been closed out, a type, be it construction, coordination, or health and safety issues. They can be assigned by a team or to individuals. assigned a geographic location and further location details, and so on. The issue's functionality can be added to drawings using the markup tool, which helps users really pinpoint where the issue is located. We'll come on to this when we actually investigate the markups of drawings further on in this presentation. Project teams are able to export metrics found in the common data environment in a report form. This could include exporting a list of issues found on the project, the amount of files created since a particular date, files associated with a particular individual, reporting issues by their cause such as coordination, design or safety, reports using a start or due dates, and so on. A lot of building information modelling, or BIM, is based around being able to include and extract comprehensive data lists and report templates inside of Autodesk Docs does exactly that. So moving on to members, what we have inside of Autodesk Docs is a very comprehensive and intuitive way of adding individuals to a project. So we can add a individual by sending them an email invite to our project. So adding individuals is a simple process and can be done via the members panel. We can apply a company depending on their license for Autodesk Docs. We can assign a role, which we've seen in the previous parts of this presentation, that the role is quite important to be assigned to an individual because it can control actually the permissions and the access they have to certain folders inside of the common data environment. And also we have different access levels. So there are two access levels involved. We have a project administrator, which basically has access to the project in its entirety, being able to create folders and so on. And then project members who can either view, create, touch the common data environment itself. We then, as we can see in the bottom right, have the available products. So depending on the licenses a organization or individual has, this is where they can toggle what they can see and what tools they can use inside of Autodesk Docs. As you can see for this presentation, the only one that has been switched on is Autodesk Docs, and Build, Cost, etc. has been switched off just for clarity on what is available just with an Autodesk Docs license. I suppose it's quite important to point out at this moment that depending on what country or region you work in, GDPR is quite an important subject. So for example, in Germany, they're quite strict on actually what information you have access to. And you can see in this common data environment, if say an organization has an individual on that project, it'll display a name, phone number, and email address. So these are certain things that need to be thought about when setting up a common data environment. Just food for thought on that scenario, really. Okay, so moving on from members, we then have general project settings. So no project common data environment would be complete without having some basic project information. Inside of Autodesk Docs, project information can be inputted when the project is created. But if not all the information is known at this point, administrators can input this information subsequently using the project settings panel, which is what's being displayed here. So if you don't know all the information, such as project value, you might even not know where the project is located. You know, the address might be defined later on. So these are all things that can be inputted subsequently by the project administrator. The information allowable includes a project name, that is the descriptor for the project inside of the Autodesk Construction Cloud list. So basically whatever name you input there will be the list, will be the overall project name that will come into a comprehensive list when selecting what project you want to be working in. A project number or reference assigned to the project. The type or sector of projects is categorized, be it a building, highways, pipework infrastructure, and so on. So just the general project type. The overall value of the project, if known. This can be quite useful metrics when a organisation or client is looking at their project portfolio as a whole. So you can see how many projects are at a certain value or between this a kind of range of values. It's all very useful metrics to have, even though it seems quite basic now. In the grander scheme of things, this is all good information to put in. So we also have the overall project value, the project address, the local time zone in which the project information is going to be delivered, and the project commencement and completion dates. I suppose for a time frame that is quite important, but it doesn't take into account things like design start date or where different stages. It is the overall project timeline. So when the project commencement is, when you start even doing feasibility studies, to the end date when all the products are handed over to the end user or client. So not all of this information is mandatory, but it does provide project teams with some high level detail, which can be beneficial as a reference source, as we just discussed. We then come on to the locations tab. So locations is no more than a simple list of how a project is broken down or split up geographically. Unfortunately, there is no map to describe this at the moment inside of Autodesk Docs, but at least there is a comprehensive list of how a project could be broken down. So if the project were a building, it could be subdivided into various levels or floors, which can then be further broken down into rooms or areas. If the project were an infrastructure type asset, it could be broken down into geographical areas or locations between chainages along a linear structure, such as a road or railway. So locations are very important if, say, you are using issues on a project, because actually when you're creating an issue, you need to define a location for that issue. So you'll need to use the project locations as a drop down. So there does need to be some locations defined on the project, even if it's just the overall. If it's quite a small project, it might just be broken down into a single area. And finally, on the general settings, we've come to the notifications, which could be quite important. They could also be quite annoying. It depends on the project setup. So the final tab of the overall settings is notifications. This allows project teams or individuals to set the frequency of how they are notified when particular tools inside the CDE, such as forms, issues, requests for information, sheets and submittals. So for example, when RFIs are created, so requests for informations, a individual or project teams will be notified via email to say someone has created a new RFI. The frequency of these notifications can be amended so that project individuals are not constantly bombarded by emails, and can be set to instantly, hourly or daily. So you can have a daily report on all the activities that are happening on a project, which is quite useful, especially if certain things are assigned to someone, and gives the project manager a good idea of what's going on as well. There is an option beneath to allow individuals to set their own frequencies as opposed to following an overall project team mandates. It might be a project is set up that actually everyone shouldn't be able to change their permissions, and it might be in the data standard that everyone is notified. But Autodesk Docs gives you that flexibility to allow individuals to do or set their own notification frequencies. This is quite a useful tool. And then we move on to the kind of more CAD orientated side of Autodesk Docs. One of the key functionality and one of the key kind of selling points of this is the 3D model viewer. So the 3D view hosted inside of Autodesk Docs allows those without CAD software to view models in the common data environment without the need for supplementary software. It includes sectioning for interrogation, a range of measuring tools, and the ability to view model properties such as Revit parameters from a Revit model. Also, aesthetically, it is of reasonable quality render and operates smoothly for speed when a model is being interrogated or navigation. or for navigational purposes. So I suppose the key points to take away here is, on a project, not everyone is going to have access to CAD software. So people like your environmental teams, your project managers, your team leads and stuff, they're not necessarily going to be designers or have access to design licenses. What Autodesk Docs gives them the ability to do is view and interrogate 3D models without having to have any supplementary software. We've seen things like Navisworks Simulate and different kind of DWG viewers in the past, but I think this is a much smoother tool and helps them keep on top of actually what's going on within design teams. So it's really good functionality. I suppose also with the 3D viewer, especially when using Revit, a designer can decide whether or not they want to publish the updated model. So I guess if someone external to the design work wants to view that model, they don't necessarily have to see the constant work in progress that's going on. It can be in incremental time frames, depends on the designer's desires on that one. So it's very useful. We'll take a look at the model viewers and stuff when we look at the live demo, which we're coming up to very shortly. So another huge capability of Autodesk Docs is drawing markup capabilities. So following the 3D model viewer, we have the ability to view two-dimensional products such as drawings, schedules and schematics. This markup facility comes with a range of tools including freehand sketching pens and highlighters, basic geometric shapes and leaders, text, clouds, callouts, polygons and polylines, the ability to locate issues which will then be added to the issues function inside of Autodesk Docs. So the issues stuff that we looked at before when looking at clash detection, coordination, any health and safety issues can actually be inserted into drawings, which is a much better way of actually locating a specific design or construction problem. But then it will be added to the overall list inside of Autodesk Docs. So that's a really good connection feature. I believe these issues can also be brought down into Revit or created in Revit as well. So it just shows Autodesk Docs connectivity with the kind of Autodesk software, the general design suites. This functionality heavily relates to what I was discussing when we looked at positive environmental impacts and allows project teams to go fully paperless if that is a project or organizational target. It also saves time and money for not having to print out check prints and markups, also allowing for better remote working benefits. Finally, one thing I did want to touch on, and it's quite an important one when working with the Autodesk Construction Cloud, is the Autodesk Desktop Connector. So this allows users to sync Autodesk Docs to a Windows Explorer environment. It is particularly useful when using applications such as Civil 3D and will be required for aspects such as data shortcuts. I think this is quite a key selling point for those who are working in a kind of hybrid system where they are still using servers as well as a cloud. This shows you can have both worlds using one single common data environment. So it's also very useful when working with Microsoft Office applications such as Word and Excel, because you'll be able to access all those files within a Windows Explorer environment, like stated. It can be downloaded by typing Autodesk Docs into, Autodesk Desktop Connector into a search engine. So it will be one of the first things that comes up in, let's say you do a Google search, or by going to www.knowledge.autodesk.com/support/desktop-connector as the URL show. So we've kind of finished on the general presentation. So what I wanted to run through with you was putting some of this theory that we've kind of looked at a high level into some practical demonstration, just to put Autodesk Docs into some sort of context for you. So we have an example of a Autodesk Docs environment here. So what I just wanted to show you is how simple an administrator can create this common data environment. So we can simply add subfolders by clicking on the ellipsis and just adding in, let's say, a structural working folder inside our WIP area. Within this structural folder, we talked about certain different aspects. So we can enforce the naming standard. We can look at permissions for that folder. So if we were just to select permissions, for example, we can, although I'm the only one in this project at the moment, if you had more project members, you could add different people to that project folder and give them a different permission level. So if we were to click on add, you can see you can add people to that folder either by their name, email address, their role, or the company they work for. So you can say anyone from X company will have permission for this folder, but not for a different one. So if this company is only involved in the civil engineering aspect of a project, they only need to access the civil engineering area of that common data environment. So it's really good how you can control these robust permissions. You can also say, actually, what permission level I want that individual organizational role to look at. So it could be a set of technicians. I want them to be able to edit inside of that folder. So they'll be able to upload, edit files, create markups, download files, and so on. But if I say we had this area in our shared or published areas, we only really want people to be able to view those files and perhaps view and download them, particularly in the published area, but maybe we want in the shared area for people to have markups and stuff. So it gives you that level of control, depends on those project requirements that we were discussing. As we're running out of time, I'm just going to show you, if I go into the WIP. This is my personal favorite tool. So looking at the naming standard, so taking advantage of all the different attributes, project teams can create as many attributes as they like, depending on the file name that they want to include on the project. Generally speaking, I don't really change this because I think the out-of-the-box solution is perfectly fine. So following ISO 19650 protocols and things like that. But what we can do inside the naming standard by just going to customize is we can see we have all the different types of attributes we want our file name to follow. And we can simply add and remove attributes as required. So inside certain attributes, we have a different way of actually how we want people to input that data. So under project, we can see people are just inputting a text field. But for volume and system, for example, this will be a drop-down list with a code and a descriptor. So what we can start doing is editing the values of those different fields or attributes. So we can add, let's say we have a fencing volume across our site. We can start to add these different codes and components. Now, you only really want your administrator to have access to this. So basically they can create a whole comprehensive list of all the codes and fields that are essentially allowable fields on the project. So you can see we can have different lists dependent on what we have, and then we can have a number at the end to make the entire file name unique. So we can either have this as a numeric value, an alphanumeric, or a text value. Beyond the general file name, we have different status and revision codes. So for example, we can decide upon our revisions are a range length between 3 and 8 characters. So if we went back into our, so just go back to Autodesk Docs for a second. We can see in our civil engineering folder, if we were to upload a file, oh, sorry. If we apply enforce a naming standard to this folder only. We can do this from the naming standard, but we can see with this tick and the little cog that a naming standard is now enforced on this project area. So if we start to upload files, we can upload from our desktop. So what I've got is a few files that we can just add. So if I add this one, we can see that this should conform to the naming standard. So when we open it, we can see it has a tick by the different naming fields because it has found that code. It has basically transposed the file name into these different fields. So it's very clever in that way. And then we can apply all the metadata. So we can apply a status and revision. And once we upload this to a folder, we can see that Autodesk Docs has cleverly deciphered actually how this naming standard is then separated into different fields. So it's a very powerful tool, and we can't change any of this. So it really does police the file naming standard on the project. What we can also do is what we discussed before was, let's say we have a file name that isn't conforming to our file naming convention. So as you can say, it will instantly pick up this file does not conform to the naming standard. So we can either actually make it conform, so we can actually add in the different file fields and make that file name as per it should be, or we can upload to the holding area, which will then mean that any kind of subcontractor who hasn't been using the naming convention, upload a whole host of files and then start assigning the naming convention. So although it shows non-conformancies, it's a very, very powerful tool. And before we just move on to the final parts of today's presentation, if we were to look at a 3D model inside, so you can see how neatly and structured all our data can be just from having a few files in there, and how we can start filtering all this information. I just wanted to show you actually what the model viewer looks like in reality. So this is just an example Revit model, and you can see actually how clearly those without CAD can just simply navigate around a model and be able to measure different lengths along it. So they can really interrogate different dimensions if for say these aspects aren't actually added to a model. They can also click on items from Revit, Civil 3D, whatever, and actually interrogate their properties. Now, this doesn't have too many parameters fulfilled, so if we were to select one of the precast units, we can start seeing there's a little bit more information about this, with stuff like Kobe data that might be required by a project at information exchange. We have different materials and finishes. That sort of data is now available to those who do not have CAD software. Now, before we run out of time, I'm just going to flip back to our presentation. So hopefully that gave you a general consensus of some of the theory behind it. Unfortunately, we had to go through the theory because it gives you a broad overview, especially since this is an introduction to Autodesk Docs. It should give you an idea of everything that's included without going into too much detail on those tools. So just as a bit of a summary then on what we've looked at before we close out today and look at a bit of a Q&A session. In an ever-changing world, I would never use the COVID pandemic as a marketing ploy. However, what we have seen from the pandemic is a shift in our working perceptions and habits, particularly when it comes to home and remote working. I feel Autodesk Docs certainly has all the capabilities organisations require in order to fulfil this requirement, so when looking at remote and home working. In my experience, this is the best cloud system I have ever worked with. And I worked with a fair few from my time in industry, including different hybrids of using servers, different cloud systems, different. It has been the most intuitive and the best one for working with Autodesk systems in particular. So if you use AEC collections, nothing beats this. it might take some thought and need to take into account end client requirements, but Autodesk Docs is certainly ISO 19650 compliant for those who are familiar with this. The workflows may not be 100% automated and does require human interaction in some cases, but aspects such as the naming standard really helps police structured data on a project. And finally, I have no doubt in my mind that Autodesk Docs is a cost-effective, time-saving and environmentally sound solution and really does the job for AEC projects and beyond. So I guess thank you very much for your attendance, and we shall go on to any questions. I'm just going to hand this over now to Johnny, who hopefully has been taking into account any questions we might.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jonathan. We've had a few questions come in, most of them from Samuel, so nice one on Samuel on answering some questions, asking some questions even. So first off is, does the naming standard automatically feed into the title block information, do you know, Jonathan?
No. So there are certain teething points that I think Autodesk certainly are looking at. So I've actually had quite a few interactions with Autodesk, and it's certainly things that's on their radar. So I would suggest that although certain tools that we've looked at today are in their infancy, it doesn't mean this is going to be never. I'm certain this is on Autodesk's radar, but at this moment in time, there is no connectivity between an AutoCAD title block or a Revit title block and that name.
Okay, right, thank you.
I suppose there is one, sorry, just before we move on, I suppose there is one connection, and that is if you were to have a field in an AutoCAD title block that's connected to that file name, well, actually, when you upload it, Autodesk Docs is taking the file name as it's named as a file or an information container, but it's also inside the CAD file, it's connected to it. So I suppose that there is a sort of hybrid there where it is connected to what's in the title block in that sense.
All right, brilliant, thank you. Will the other teams or external businesses need to have Autodesk Docs to access the information? Or can you sort of imagine it means, you know, can you send out a link, that kind of thing?
Yeah, understood. I believe there is I can't fully clarify this because I suppose my expertise lie more in the kind of CAD connectivity to it, but it's certainly something where I believe people can share licenses on projects. And actually you can still share links and people can access. So I think you can have certain areas of your common data environment where external parties who don't have a Autodesk license can access that. So I think there are workarounds. I can't give you the firm solution for that, but I know it is possible.
Yeah, that's understandable. I'll be able to look into that for you, Samuel, and follow back up on that. And another question is, does it create Gantt charts via the phasing information, as far as you're aware?
So that there is a couple of things. So depending on the metrics you need to come out of Autodesk Docs, Autodesk Docs includes insights, which can give you certain amounts of graphs and stuff. So, but when you're talking about Gantt charts, you're usually talking about kind of construction timelines and 4D modeling. Now, that would be required. You would require Autodesk Build for that as an add-on, which is looking at the construction side of your common data environment. So I guess Autodesk Docs is a vanilla application, no, but it can be done via Autodesk.
Yeah, all right, brilliant. That's great. Thank you. I've had a couple of questions regarding pricing from Christian and also from Samuel, if it's included in his current package. I suppose I'll get back to you all individually regarding that, because it's it's one of those variables that based on what packages that you have and that kind of thing. But if any of you have any further questions at all, don't hesitate to drop me an email. You can see my email address there. It's just johnnyclay@cadac.com. This is the first webinar in a series that we're doing. So you'll receive an invitation to others in the series. They might be of interest, they may not. And as we said at the start, these will all be recorded on our website, so you can disseminate those to other colleagues that you think might be of interest. But yeah, just from me, thank you for attending. Thank you, Jonathan, for your great presentation, and I hope to see you again in the near future.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Right, brilliant. Cheers, thanks.